Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 85. I'm your host, Joe Hannan. Joe, this time from Central America. I've been looking forward to doing this episode for a long time. It's with my good friend Yego and the rest of the minds behind Power Trip Worldwide. Power Trip is a fight fanzine that emphasizes all things grappling, heavy emphasis on Jiu-Jitsu naturally. And it's a great project. It's sort of like a campfire. I think that a certain subset of jiu-jitsu grapplers will find themselves gravitating toward. And I really look forward to you hearing from them as to what inspired their decision to make Power Trip and also what they want to create with it. Ultimately, I think it's a mission that we can all get behind if you're a listener of this podcast. Check it out. Let me know what you think. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 85.
So I've been looking
Robbie?
forward to getting you guys on the podcast for a long time. I've only gotten to know Yego so far. I love the guy. But as soon as I saw Power Trip, the brand, the mission, the vision, I was in love from the jump. So it's awesome to sit down and talk to the minds behind it. I guess just right off the bat, can you guys tell me a little bit about who you are, what brought you to jiu-jitsu, and what brings you to Power Trip? Like what skills are you bringing to bear on the Power Trip vision?
Sure. I am Jimmy Jolliffe. I'm a writer and musician and amateur in the sense of loving Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I started in 2010 with Josh Griffiths at a school called Clockwork in New York City. It was a series of kind of like chance events that started with my wife subbing Pilates at like a Muay Thai gym. And then once I was like sort of on the track, I fell in love with grappling and have trained it in whatever capacity I was able to ever since. And then I've known Yego for a really long time. And when he began jiu-jitsu,
probably about 10 years,
probably at least maybe around that. And we know each other from some social, some creative circles. When he got into jiu-jitsu, it was one of those times where, I don't know if you've experienced this, actually either of y'all, but when you have somebody you're close to be like new, it makes you new again, and you get this like all the excited feelings. You get to kind of like, I mean, it's the same thing I feel like I'm going through with parenting, where like starting over the journey makes everything a lot more interesting. And I think, to be honest, we can get deeper into this later, but that's kind of the name of the game with grappling. It's just like sort of like re-beginning and like approaching details as if you don't know them in some ways and being sort of porous for new information. But I think that's probably enough explanation of who I am.
Robbie, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. My name's Robbie Alvarez. I'm an industrial designer, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I started Jiu-Jitsu training at least around 13, 14 years ago. My brother got me into it. We were fighting his kids, and then eventually he brought me to the gym with him, and then it just never stopped, And I think a couple of years ago, mid-pandemic, I started an Instagram account where I was just sharing a lot of like random photos of martial arts, different like obscure things I was finding online that kind of related to martial arts in ways. And then through that, I kind of connected with these two guys online, and we just started sharing a lot of content with each other and just vibing off of kind of what we were looking at. And then these guys kind of shared the idea of Power Trip with me, and I vibed with it. I thought it was really cool. What Jimmy made a really good point about how we kind of had this new feeling of like looking at things in a different way. And I felt like it was really fresh, and they asked me to kind of join them in a way where I see if I can kind of like help and just bring new ideas to what they were doing. And yeah, from that point on, we've kind of just been riffing off each other and posting things online that people have been liking. So hopefully we can just keep this going. It's been pretty fun so far.
Yeah. Well, I'm Yego, and I'm a designer by trade. I've been doing that for a long time, since about the year 2000, 1999. And I have taken a long path through design, and I kind of treat it in a lot of ways like not surprisingly, like my creative practice, like an artist, not just like where I execute for clients, but I use it to collaborate with my friends. And I made a lot of friends through design. And I even think about, like, I'm talking to you guys, this is kind of also that. And the other way I also made a lot of friends was through skateboarding or punk rock or through old BMWs. And in any case I get in, I really want to, like, epistemologically get into everything and really try. Today we were saying, like, I'm kind of leaning into the obsession that I'm an obsessive compulsive person, like just clinically, and I'm like leaning fully into that with jiu-jitsu. I started in 2023, last year. I've tried to do it almost every single day since I started. I do it multiple times a day, and I really have used that in the same way with skateboarding and punk rock and design. Like, it's now my part of my voice and my practice creatively, and so when I knew Jimmy for a long time, but when we went and visited each other, he was living in North Carolina and I went and visited, happened to be in Asheville, and we reconnected. It was last year, and it really kind of sparked me again, got me got my feet on the mat, for the first time. And after that, Jimmy's kind of been like my Sherpa, and Robbie's been my Sherpa. There's another guy who's involved with this called Joe Staples. He's been a real big influence on everybody around Power Trip, and specifically getting me into jiu-jitsu. So for me, it's kind of the other side of the coin with my creative practice. And, getting into zines is nothing new for me. I've had multiple magazines and zines. And so this is kind of an extension of that creative practice. We're all older. Robbie's a little younger than Jimmy and I, but we're older. And so this is kind of just where we're putting our kind of side project energy. At least for the two of us, we've always had side projects.
Yeah. I mean, side project's been a relative term, but yeah, like I'd also say almost like kind of primary personal project is the way I think about it. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting because there actually been times for me where, given fluctuations in my own career, jiu-jitsu has always been that in a lot of ways too. It's almost like a process-driven place to go and grow that you can bring to your other work, or maybe you need to just kind of like offload whatever you're going through so that you can, almost in like a maintenance way, right? Like jiu-jitsu has this way of being creative when it needs to, and being a place to go and check out and just like get on the ride if it needs to too. And so it's like, in a strange way, I think it really pairs well with process-driven creative work, whether that be like design or writing or whatever, stuff that you're not like, it's not necessarily like really precious or poetic, where you're like, you wake up and do it even when you don't feel like it necessarily. I mean, jiu-jitsu, you always feel like it, but you know what I mean? Like there are hard rolls and ones you necessarily don't want to do, but they make you better and that kind of thing. And so for me, that's why a project like this is a pretty natural. I mean, we see sort of Power Trip as an ode to what we like about it. It's almost like, I feel like I've made jiu-jitsu be where I processed the rest of my life and the rest of my even creative endeavors for the last however many years. And then now it's almost like we're flipping that. So it's like we're letting the other sort of like outputs that we have be the filter for how we feel about jiu-jitsu rather than sort of the natural way. So, but it's been really interesting because we're a multidisciplinary outfit, but when we all kind of have different sort of like native creative languages, and that's what's been fun about it for me.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to revisit something Robbie said. Thanks, man. I wanted to revisit something Robbie said. I didn't realize that he was sort of out there in the ether creating content, and then you guys were just kind of vibing off what you were producing. Like that, to me, that organic attractor factor is something that's really beautiful about the project and about jiu-jitsu in general. Like, I used to travel a lot for work covering medical conferences, and, I'd be in random cities. And like, I remember once I was in Atlanta eating at like a Waffle House, and these cops are like eyeing me up. I'm like, what, am I doing something wrong here? They're like, hey man, do you train jiu-jitsu? And it turns out like they were just looking at my ears. And they were like, hey, you should come train with us, and they were like inviting me to like come to their open mat later that day. And It's just a beautiful thing that there's something instantly familiar but fresh about Power Trip that just attracted me like a lightning rod. And it's so cool to see, like, that's how Robbie got pulled into it. And also, like, sort of that's how you got pulled into it too, Yego and Jimmy. Like, there's just this magnetism to it that's attracting people.
When I saw what Robbie was doing, I was like, oh shit, he's already been doing this for years. That's how I felt. And so I just wrote him. I think we just started talking, and
Yeah.
I think what you're starting to scratch at is something that I think I would attribute it's from skateboarding and punk. When I was young, and because of my age, it was before the internet. If you were wearing a band shirt, it meant that you really were a fan of that band. It wasn't like a fake thing. You know what I'm saying? If you were wearing a punk band, there was only like 1,500 people in the world who knew that band. Right. If you were wearing that shirt, you knew what was up. And there's still a little bit of that with jiu-jitsu. I'm late to the party, but what I like in that story that you just related, and in a lot of the stories that, and the serendipity that has happened with our relationship with Robbie, our relationship with you, where we've met through this attraction, I actually think it's the same for me as me being excited of seeing somebody else with the band shirt when you're visiting a new city, and it kind of breaks the ice of like, oh yeah, let's talk. Cauliflower ear is another thing because you can't fake it. So like that's a whole other thing. It's not even like a punk thing.
Supposedly there's kids in Brazil that make themselves have cauliflower ear, which that might be like urban legend, but if it is, I don't know, I'll believe it.
It's like distressed jeans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard stories about certain disparaging stories about other schools where like kids would tie their belts around their head and like, rough their ears up to look harder or whatever. So I guess it's just the same riff or different riff on the same urban legend.
It's classic jiu-jitsu that you heard it in the context of like some other bad school does this, right? Like that's a
exactly
time on like, oh, them over there, they're different, it's like a classic thing.
Yeah.
So point blank, let me ask you guys, what is Power Trip and what is a zine? Because there are going to be, I try and post as much stuff on my social channel as possible from you guys because I love it, and also because I want to help spread the word. But there are a lot of people out there listening to this. Well, a lot. Let's be honest, it's like a couple hundred people or something like that. There are a fair number of people listening to this who are going to be like, what is a zine? What is Power Trip? We've never talked about this before. So let's answer the boring question first.
Sure. Let's start with what is a zine, and then we'll get into what is Power Trip. Because,
first and foremost, Power Trip is kind of a fan club that's a fan of grappling, first and foremost.
Yeah.
So, but then what Power Trip is...
The first thing that we're going to do is a zine.
Yeah.
A zine is just short kind of slang for a magazine. The term came out in the 1960s from music fan clubs, and which is why, as a fan club, we want to put out a zine first. We call it, it's kind of like a fight fanzine, we call it, and it's about bringing people closer together through fighting, which we like. When we kind of came up with this idea, we like the tension in that, because of like, obviously people come closer together with fighting, but there's a double entendre there that kind of talks a little bit about the community and the humanity that comes through intense kind of wrestling all the way to fighting. And what we do kind of allows us to tap into some of that, some different things, and can build strong community and give us kind of some of the tools that we don't have in a lot of our everyday life. I would almost call BJJ Meditations a zine that's in a podcast form. It's a very similar concept. We're going to kind of express our values through a series of issues. It'll be short format. Hopefully we'll put out a couple more than one per year, but it's a printed item. Yeah, it's printed. We didn't say that. It'll be like 100 pages, and it'll come with a bunch of other printed items. We want it to be tactile, and something that you can not be ashamed to talk to your partner's friends about and feel embarrassed about doing jiu-jitsu because the artwork is at a high level, or the things that we're saying are not about pit bulls and angry gorillas, but hopefully we can bring a little bit more, a different style. Early on, Robbie and I have been talking about wanting to be more like a skate company aesthetically than some of the other things that are out there.
For the record, though, I do have a pit bull and tattoos of angry gorillas.
There's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong.
But
I do too.
I mean, also just kind of like to say it's a print object is, I mean, the world of zines is interesting because it's either the most slapped together thing in the world or like ultimately like a multimedia art book, and we're going to land somewhere in the top third of in terms of original costs and hopefully do as best as we can. But what we wanted to do is start making things that lived up to how much jiu-jitsu sort of inspires us aesthetically. And honestly, like, I really love martial arts culture, all of it, hook, line, and sinker. Like, warts and all, pit bulls, whatever, script, Marcus Aurelius quotes. Like, I'm omnivorous for it, and it's not. If anything, I like how this sport has brought me outside of any kind of comfortable aesthetic zone or discursive place or face to face with like police in cities I'm not from. Like, there's a great example of just like, I don't have another way to meet you guys. Like, I have a very similar story that involves the fire department coming to my house the first day I lived in this house that we're in right now. And literally it was like, you train? And my wife thought it was hilarious. She was like, this is your like fireman fantasy or whatever. Like, so like fire department, you look like you could fight. And you're like, whatever. But like, I mean, long story longer, like jiu-jitsu is very beautiful and there are many perspectives in it. There are a lot of different kinds of specifically creative folks, but I say creative in a really broad way. And like Power Trip is sort of our sort of gift back to that and our contribution to that. I don't really think like it's really, I mean, and it's about all of it's meant to encompass more of jiu-jitsu than we see in a lot of ways, especially in a time that's hyper focused on top level competitors. Again, love them, would include, think they're interesting, and I think they're part of a wheel. They're part of a wider thing. And like we're interested in anything that anyone can get out of jiu-jitsu, not just winning gold medals or being great. And that is not to say, again, we love greatness, but we think there's a lot of ways to be great, basically. And so like Power Trip is kind of about opening the aperture and finding smaller stories, wider stories, further flung stories than just what you might see in like, if there were a Sports Illustrated for jiu-jitsu, for instance,
Yeah, I love the one of the other things that attracted me to it right away was sort of the DIY ethos to it. Like there's a punk through line that runs through Power Trip that was just like amphetamine for me, because it spoke to sort of my roots as an amateur musician and a performer, and there's just that like basement show energy to it that we're just doing this because we love it. It's not about the big payoff. Like there's no big payoff at the end of the day. The payoff is the love of this thing. And that's sort of what grounds the entire operation in my eyes. And that's just fucking beautiful.
Thanks, yeah, I think we should just try to have as much fun as we can with it. Like if you look at the posts, a lot of the posts are kind of like tongue in cheek. We try to take a lot of the seriousness out of it that you see in a lot of jiu-jitsu media that's online, whether it's competition based or MMA stuff. A lot of it's very serious, and so we're just trying to take a more of a lighter approach to it.
Yeah, like what if fighting could just be fun? That's kind of like the vibe. But also like aesthetically and ethically, like I think Jimmy and I are both old hardcore kids. I grew up like a straight edge vegan punk who learned how to design at Kinko's in probably 1996 or 1997 is when I started making flyers for basement shows. So a lot of the things that you're picking up are the things that I can't help but put down in terms of where my roots come from as a designer. And then I'm doing it on purpose too, because as we said, Robbie and I wanted it to look more like a Vision streetwear from 1989 than we did necessarily all the other brands that exist. And that's been fun too, to try and bring outside influence in and try, I'm kind of like not embarrassed to be brand new. I think that's also the other side of what Jimmy's talking about with not focusing only on professionals and black belts, is like being new is a huge benefit as a learner. It's an incredible benefit. It's also why children are so good at picking up new languages, because with blind eyes, you can actually look at things really, really objectively, take what's important, leave what's not. You start to get influenced. The more you're indoctrinated with jiu-jitsu, the harder it is to learn at that kind of proverbial white belt mentality. So some of, like, Jimmy said this phrase the other day that I felt like really encapsulated. He's like, we're pro beginner. I like that because I like the idea of being a professional beginner, but also like again, we like all these double entendres. Like, I like the idea that like that's our politics, pro beginner, straight up. Yeah. Like, we're also pro black belt. That's cool too, but pro beginner. And if you're a black belt who thinks like a beginner, that's kind of where you're going to get that sweet spot for us. So there's a big part of this. Like, if you have a body, then you're an athlete. If, you know, I heard Kristen Woodman say, I thought this was helpful. He's like, it's not for everybody, but it's for anybody. And I like that idea too. You know, so a lot of what you're saying, I think we hope to kind of continue to show that. Like, we talk, even the professionals that we talk to, we have a couple of pros who are going to be, you know, talking, and people who are in the profession like yourself, who are going to be kind of in the zine. But when we talk to them, a lot of times we're asking them questions, maybe less about their medals and a little bit more about how they stay creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, that to me, that's
process oriented.
That's the denominator, right? Like, that's what everybody has in common. It's like, it's not about excluding great grapplers. It's about like finding what I get out of the game that they might also, what we might have in common. I think draws an interesting picture. It's interesting when we're talking about hardcore and jiu-jitsu, because I started in New York, and the you know, general population of martial artists in New York is peppered with old, like, actual hardcore legends. Like, my first strength coach was in a hardcore band that I grew up on. His name's Gavin Van Vlack. He played in that band Burn. And so, like, I just, like, thought he was such a larger than life dude. And then he was, like, an amazing guy to train with. And then going over to Clockwork, there was always, like, they did an event every year that was with some of the 25 to life guys. That was like a charity role during the Black and Blue Bowl, which is like this big festival. So to me, and it was funny because you'd go there and the scariest looking dudes in the room were not the scariest dudes in the room. Like, there'd be like Robbie would be there, and that's who I would be afraid of. But there'd be guys who were like twice as wide as me, covered in like tattoos that were all screaming. And like, I'm like,
the other guy, the guy who's unassuming, is the dangerous guy.
I don't want to fight any of them, if I'm being honest, but like, I know what to expect from the other guy, at least. So,
but yeah, I
wanted to talk to you guys about. Sorry, go ahead, Yego.
I was just going to talk about kind of that ground up approach and the kind of inverted triangle. Like, we see so much content about the best jiu-jitsu players in the world, and I watch a lot of it. Don't get me wrong. I watch a lot of jiu-jitsu competition and I have my favorites and all this stuff. I would collect the cards. I'm a fan of jiu-jitsu and grappling, but I also know that 80 to 90% of everybody who's doing it is not. And those people have jobs and they really sacrifice a lot to make it 3 days a week or more to the dojo and to be putting in that work. And I don't know. I think that's really heroic. It's hard to start jiu-jitsu at 39 or 40 or whatever. I just did it. And I want to make it a little easier for people because it kind of changed my life, you know?
Yeah. And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, was this, you know, bottom up versus top down. Like, that's kind of one of the things that I don't want to say has irritated me about jiu-jitsu, but it is one of those holdovers from the martial arts sort of writ large, where it's a hierarchical system and it is top down. And it's some of that, like, look, I think the dose makes the poison, right? Like, I think there are people who need that rigidity and structure, but I chafe under it a little bit. And that is another sort of attractor to me of Power Trip, is this egalitarian approachability to it. I mean, I was just sitting here thinking as I was listening to you guys speak, like, I think, Jimmy, I'm assuming you're a black belt. Robbie, you're a black belt. I think you guys might be the first black belts that have ever been on this podcast.
Brown belt.
You know, my first. Fortune. You're brown belt. Okay. So
I'll get there.
Either way, you know, so Robbie, you win. You know, you're the first black belt to be on this podcast, I think, because Erica was a brown belt, and then my second guest, Elizabeth Bass, is a blue belt. And that's sort of something that has been meaningful to me throughout my journey, is that whether we're talking about jiu-jitsu or things from a thematic standpoint, there are people from all experience levels that you can learn from, and whose perspectives comprise the art, as a beautiful entity. So to not speak to those people and to not include them in the conversation seems really stupid. And it just seems like you guys get that and are running with it in a beautiful way.
I mean, it's interesting too. The belt system is taking L's all over the place, and even in competition, right? Like, there's no reason to
killer.
Yeah, I mean, even I mean, like Nikki Rod only now has gotten a black belt in the last year.
Purple belt, right?
But I'm really talking about like Pixley. I mean, I just went through this thing where I kind of like, I was in North Carolina for 3 years, and a room full of very good grapplers. This kind of helped widen my perspective on like what I, like thinking about grappling, and not just from a jiu-jitsu lens. But if you're looking for the best grapplers in a town that is not as big as New York, not as big as Los Angeles, or, Austin, for an example, like it behooves you to train with wrestlers, or to, like whatever's there, if there's a good judo program, like, and, we're seeing, I mean, jiu-jitsu's widening in terms of like what skills are useful in it in a lot of ways, especially with the growth of competition no-gi as its own thing. But then like somebody who wrestled at a good school in college, I mean, they don't give belts for that, but like you train with them and you feel like they certainly know how to maintain a good band in the top position. And like guard passing is an intuitive thing to that type of player, and guys can get good really fast without having been given the blessing of a coach. And I think it's, as somebody in a position where you're like trained mostly gi jiu-jitsu for a really long time, you have the option to either sort of like hide somehow in a safe, cozy program, or like come to terms with what you don't know. And then I'll like, poof, that actually kind of got me out of some, like, I was in like deep, stiff purple belt blues, like senioritis kind of stuff, where I just like was really narrow A game, like terribly like not porous focus, and then like got broken out of it by some wrestlers. And like, I am super grateful for it. And I think in a weird way, we're kind of seeing that happen on the macro level, where we're like, any competitor that is a threat to win, like wrestlers have done really well in jiu-jitsu. And also it turns out, because Nikki Rod's a great example, right? Like, and now we're talking about competitors. Like,
I was just going to say, you're talking about all these pros.
But like, like I was just lucky enough to see him train in person a couple weeks ago. And like, he looks bigger and more technical in person. Like, he's doing jiu-jitsu, like the beautiful thing about this game is like elite athletes can also improve their grappling by learning jiu-jitsu. It's like, I think it sort of proves the point. It's like, if you want to move better, this is a great way in to that, no matter if you're a, dad with 4 random jobs, like myself, or if you're already an elite athlete. Like, jiu-jitsu is not going to make anybody a worse mover.
I'm gonna make a hot take. I agree with everything you just said, and that's the kind of path that I hope to be on too. That where I'm getting to be good, and as good as I can possibly be. But I also think that power trip is fascinating, because I'm not sure that we care if you're good, and I think that's kind of an important part of it too.
No, it's we care if you're better,
if you can make,
but not if you're good.
Yeah,
right?
if you want to make yourself better, we care. But
Yeah.
we don't care if you're good.
No.
And if you end up at the end of your better journey and you're still all right, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I'm hoping to
I'm
get
serious.
I want to get I'm like asking to get demoted at promotions. Like, I agree. I feel like yeah, good is, there's no such thing as there, like, I think as a writer, I've been writing about 3 times as long as I've been doing jiu-jitsu, and the better I get, the further I feel from where I feel like I'm going. And I hope to feel that way in almost any creative endeavor that I reach, right? And so that's where that's one thing we're really doing that's kind of been fun, is like, we started out as a mood board exercise, digging through kind of like old martial arts culture like 100+ years of martial arts culture. And because sort of like where you're like jiu-jitsu is in this one aesthetic place, roughly a sphere at least. And then like vintage martial arts culture has a lot of cool stuff. And now that we've like differentiated enough from it, we're sort of in the post McDojo era. It's cool to go back and do graphic explorations and stuff like that. But it's funny because sometimes the language or the way you think about it, I'll like think a thought and it will also kind of be a trite like martial arts 1.0 kind of insight. But I'm like, that's
They
great.
all work.
Yeah.
Dude, we love it. Yeah.
It's welcome to me because it's like it gives me a way in on like being able to take myself too seriously and also not take myself too seriously at the same time.
We kind of promised
about. Sorry, go ahead, Yego.
No, I was just going to say we kind of promised ourselves if we weren't having fun with it, we probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah. With the project.
Yeah, we powered through.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our agreement.
You mentioned this idea of better and sort of that being the North Star for being a part of this community. I wanted to ask you guys a bit about Posi-Core because Posi-Core seems to be part of the aesthetic. And that seems like a very Posi-Core thing to me to say, like, it's about being better. We don't care if you're like good or great, or even if you're just okay at the end, but you're like a little bit more okay than where you started. Like that's what this is all about. So
it's a huge part of it.
Help me understand Posi-Core a little bit and how it relates.
Yeah, like okay. So for those who don't know, I suppose, let me try my best version. In the 1980s, specifically around 1988, New York hardcore and some of the surrounding things had like this positive hardcore look, and it was a lot of people, like young kids, who were looking to like maybe not drink, not smoke, set up community, kind of like be positive influences kind of to one another. A lot of it is about friendships and like not stabbing each other in the back and stuff like this.
And in New York, not stabbing each other literally.
It might have been literally New York. One of the band, like a couple of the bands that you might know from this era, he mentioned Burn, which is kind of adjacent, but then there'd be like Youth of Today or Chain of Strength or Gorilla Biscuits, and like these are kind of the bands you see us sometimes posting songs with too. So there's a big influence of like literally Posi-Core. And then now, like other things, the word kind of can be stretched. And so I think you'd almost be able to equate it with this idea of PMA or positive mental attitude. And they're similar in their approaches. Both have heavy kind of like maybe original Krishna influences.
Dude, so that one's actually even weirder. PMA came from Napoleon Hill. So I don't know if you know who that is. He was like a self-help book type dude who wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. And then
that's right.
And then got a hold of it. And he made PMA like a hardcore thing. And then also, I should say, like PMA is a big part of the sort of like Clockwork Jiu-Jitsu DNA thing. So like obviously I'm heavily influenced by that, that whole sphere over there. But yeah.
So like literally we kind of grew up with Posi-Core, like from the music, and we still talk about hardcore and stuff like that. And then like figuratively, it's about finding like, the lighter side of a lot of these things and trying to, it's tough. You talk a lot, Joe, about exploring the darker side of yourself through jiu-jitsu and like stepping into the shadow and seeing what you're capable of and making sure that you understand who you are as a person. I think the other side of that, while that's very important, is also like stepping into the light and understanding how you can try and benefit yourself the most by putting yourself in the most positive scenarios to start with in these situations. Even in jiu-jitsu, there's some negative ass ways to start jiu-jitsu. You can have a not good first experience all over the country, all over the world. But that magical one where you sign up for the 6 months at the dojo before you leave at the end of the day, which is what happened to me. Like that's the PMA that I think, we kind of were joking and when Jimmy was saying that he's like writing these kind of like 1.0 martial arts proverbs and we're coming up with these things, like we even said that PMA for us stands for like, positive mat awareness or positive mental, like there's this idea that like just bring that to the mats and you're probably gonna like have a better jiu-jitsu or wrestling or judo practice.
It's like if you don't have any context for hardcore, it's basically funny that there'll be like whole songs of a bunch of kids yelling about cleaning your bedroom, basically, is like a short there'll be like weird Like, it might as well be about like brushing your teeth. You know, like there's literally Gorilla Biscuit songs about like cleaning your bedroom.
Totally.
And like, and to us, it felt like a perfect precursor to, you know, fighting about being friends. Like, it's the same type of funny, cuddly, but forceful irony or whatever. So it's like and I mean, it's really just like it's our point of view. It's like it's not all of our point of view, but it certainly heavily influences us, and it's a natural fit. And I mean, I would also say like only one of many influences as far as I'm concerned on Power Trip, but definitely a point of orientation.
Yeah, you could, from my perspective, I'm just as influenced by lots of like the reggae influences and the dub influences that we also post, and a lot of the aesthetics come from reggae albums from the 1970s that, you know, I collect and things like that. So, and you know, a lot of like, you know, Robbie, when he was doing Solid Bass, and he still does that stuff sometimes. Solid Bass is the Instagram that he was doing and brand that he was doing. But like, there's a lot of different influences there, and like skate, surf, snowboard, weird audio ads from 1992. A lot of different stuff influenced that too. So it's a visual culture mashup. When we say punk and hardcore, and when you kind of pick up on some of the anti-authoritarian vibes that like some of the things like bottom up stuff and things like that, that's a little bit of our values coming through. But then the aesthetic culture, I think, is kind of open for influence. I'm personally open. It's part of it. Like, I'm open-minded to almost anything, right? Like, that's what we're saying.
I mean, it's meant to be omnivorous, like the game is. Like, basically, who you meet in jiu-jitsu is kind of whoever walked in the door and signed up within the last 12 years. And that's you know what I mean? And but I also love that it's like a true regional experience. Like, you know, I've trained in Los Angeles, and I've trained, I mean, in terms of like recurring, like not just dropping in or whatever, I've trained in the Appalachian Mountains, Los Angeles, California, and New York. And like, trust me, the experience is vastly different. The kind of like flora and fauna of gyms is mad different in all those places. And like, that's what's great about, I mean, down to the fact that there are people, you know, I always like joke, like there's people I have trained with for years. We all wear the same clothes. We might not remember each other's names, but we know the grip set you're going to try to get on me. Like, I know their game, even if I don't know who they are. I know how many kids they have. I don't know, for some reason, things like elude you, but also we're like doing oxygen deprivation. Like, I understand why my memory is not like the most acute, but like, it's interesting that like the difference, the breadth of folks that you meet, even within one gym. Like, there'll be bankers and dudes who are on crews that fix the subway, and like, you know, intermittently unemployed songwriters like myself, or, you know, streetwear executives, which is an actual job in New York, or like, and then you meet bakers, teachers, you know, fire department guys, like carpenters, you know, like,
that's where like this idea that fighting brings us closer together. Like he just described it, you know, like that's what we mean. How often in our modern lives where we're so siloed by our algorithms, not to kind of get on that soapbox, but like, this is the opposite of that. Walk in, and anyone who's stuck around for the last 12 years at the gym, who signed up at the special after the new year, that's who you're going to meet. And it's going to be a really fascinating kind of swath of folks, or hopefully it will be. Anyway, that part is really inspiring.
Yeah. You know, you make a good point, Yego, about jiu-jitsu sort of being an antidote to the sort of segmentization of society. Like, a lot of times I keep up with the news like anyone else, and I just scratch my head in disbelief at the level of polarization. And it's not that I don't know people. Like, I mean, people have images about New Jersey, and especially the area I'm from, as it sort of being like this monolithic political space. But, you know, like I interact with people from all different walks of life, and literally, like, you know, share sweat, blood, and tears with them on a regular basis. And it's very hard for me to be that dogmatic and that rigid when you actually have this real human experience of grappling. And it really does. I don't want to present jiu-jitsu as this panacea for like all the world's ills or whatever, but it really does sort of like put humanity front and center, and it diminishes, at least for me, I don't know about for you guys, it diminishes the polarization a little bit. That was most apparent to me during the pandemic when I didn't have access to it. Like, oh, this thing I use to relate to people and relate to the world in a tangible way has been taken from me. And now I see how attractive it is to like go on this ideological warpath or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think there's three things that makes me think of specific to Power Trip. That is why so basically like, that's why we want to do a physical thing. Obviously, it's a hilarious time to be really all in on print media. Like when,
I love
like, we've done
money making opportunity.
We're sharing our sketches and we like aren't finishing the zine because we're actually publishing content. It's this funny paradox of right now, but like, so we want to make a physical thing that you will have had to have been somewhere or written us, or we have to go walk and fulfill it, or at least somebody does or whatever. Like, and then that's not forever necessarily, but a physical object as a tribute to this art is necessary for us in a certain way, right? So there's that. There's the fact of, again, jiu-jitsu physically mentally takes you out of your silos, because in the jiu-jitsu sphere, I think I get a lot of content that they think I want. Like, I wish I could just edit out like the stuff around jiu-jitsu that they think I want.
Like supplements?
Maybe, or like, manosphere stuff.
Sure.
Like, you got the wrong guy, but like, but then like, there's this idea which we are going to kind of like tackle in an ongoing way, or at least address in an ongoing way of like third places. And they're lost, like the third place in American society. Again, we're back on the soapbox, but like retail is less of a thing in our lives. Skate shops, record stores, we're just as influenced by. The gym is my barber shop. The gym is clearly, right? I don't need a barber shop necessarily. It depends on who you ask, but like, yeah, like it's a place that I have to go and talk to people, and they can surprise me or play a playlist that I don't have a way of knowing the songs, or it's not in my zeitgeist. Like, it forces me literally out of my comfort zone physically.
Yeah.
And then like the gyms, like we want to start talking about, we almost like, so in our, not to like tease it too hard, but we have a profile where a gym run by guys we admire who are, stories in their own right. The gym is the story in our story. Our editorial point of view is that this is a kind of a profile on the place, and therefore the people, like how the people come to inhabit it and how the culture springs from the actual places. To me, like, if you don't train and you don't have anywhere to be that feels meaningful, sorry, we've got some helicopters. Again, more regional flavor for you, but this is Los Angeles. Yeah. they're gonna hover low and be like, "Hey, you guys train?" But like, but no, like, so jiu-jitsu as a third place for us to go is 85% of what I even think when I say it makes me better, in that it just gets me out, gets me moving, and makes me talk to people that I wouldn't necessarily know, and then gets me friends that are sort of randomized in terms of my normal cultural routes.
That's important,
right?
You're in your 40s, you just don't have that avenue.
Yeah.
I think our brand is a lot bigger than just the men that you see here. I hope that, right? But certainly if I'm also talking about men over or around 40, which the both of you are getting closer to, but we're very much in, it's very hard to break out of those lanes, and scary even to make new friends. And I think that this, even if I might not remember your name, homie at the gym is like a really important aspect for me keeping sane and not just like in the same patterns. And I don't know, for me, when I moved from New York, stopped riding the subway for a period of time. And that was part of where I got a lot of my influence of the rest of the society and the buzz and the craziness and the normalness and all the stuff in between. And I started a commute in LA, and that really took me away from it. This has thrust me back in. And you know what? I'm riding the train again to work. And I can like totally handle the train, and I feel safe on the train because I train jiu-jitsu, whether or not that's true, because the dude on the train this morning had a hammer. Like, but, like there's a confidence. No, but I'm saying there's like a confidence in being in yourself again in the world, that the mat, you talk about the examined life a lot, that the mat helps you examine and put into perspective. So when I leave, I'm personally a better person. You know, I tend to say that maybe as I'm a better man, but like generally as I'm a better person. Yeah, that's punk to me. I don't know. At this age, that like Henry Rollins' version of punk, like you're working on yourself, punk, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, and
No,
it's
I
because
agree.
there's nothing like inherently better about your character necessarily, but I just think it's good. Heterogeneity in general and exposure to perspective is a good thing, period.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think there is a trap where you just assume because people are black belts in jiu-jitsu that they're black belts in everything. You want to ask them medical questions. You want to ask them
Some black
for
belts think
social
so,
advice. Exactly. And like, you know, where I stand on this matter should be clear. But like, yeah, it's not a PhD. But that said, again, like if your perspective requires you not interfacing with people physically, and this isn't about jiu-jitsu, this is about life, then your perspective is fragile. And that's the same thing with your game. If you can, you know, live in North Carolina for 3 years and all of a sudden you need lapels in order to sweep, then you need to find some new sweeps. And this was my tragic tale. And we're having a comeback season, but it was rough going there for a bit. Actually, I trained with someone from Princeton in Asheville, strangely enough. I don't know if this is like off topic, but
No, it's not off topic. It was probably Colin.
It was Colin. Colin is he has the distinction of being like a very big athletic dude who's also very technical. I remember, he was a very fun, super smart, real generous training partner, but like, yeah, that's cool. Real good work. He's very like fun person to grapple with. So
Colin was a guest on the podcast. He's a great friend. He's somebody I turn to regularly for coaching and advice. You know, he's a brown belt. I'm a black belt. Oh, you know, like, so what? Colin has beautiful jiu-jitsu, and he's just one of the most dedicated students of the art that I've known in my time in the art. And it's awesome that you got to meet him and train with him. I frequently go to Asheville just because my wife and I like Asheville, and I asked him like, "Oh, is there anywhere to train?" But I didn't make it. He recommended the place you were training at, but I just didn't have time to make it over there. But next time I'm in town, I'll make it a point to go train there. So one of the things we didn't talk about is this idea of what's lacking right now in jiu-jitsu. And I guess we've talked a bit about it like tangentially, but it seems like, to me anyway, power trip sort of completes the equation somehow. And I'm not sure exactly how it is, but it feels like a missing piece. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, like, what's missing and how does power trip sort of fulfill that?
I mean, it's awesome to hear that you think that. First
you.
of all, like I mean, what I think, it's not exact. What we're doing, I think, is sharing our authentic responses and sort of like paying tribute to the culture in order. I think there could be more and different points of view and kind of like design points of view, stories, like there's more stories in jiu-jitsu than are being aired. And I think our angle feels new. It's nice to hear that it feels new. I kind of feel like it's a very more the merrier thing. I think like if people are like and want to see what we're doing, support it in any way that you can. Of course, I'm like happy with that. But I also think just like what I think jiu-jitsu is proliferating in a big way, and actually training in the South made me really excited about the prevalence of newer gyms and people branching out and like the more widespread availability of jiu-jitsu in general. And so I think that should right behind that wave of more gyms should be more perspectives, more aesthetic orientations, more kind of like demographics speaking, more voices in the crowd. And so like for us, this is just like our take, what we have to offer. And like, you know, we're like super stoked for your sort of like, I mean, even those kind words or like your support for us, but it also feels like I will be happy if it feels like there's 10 things that are felt like they could be things because we were a thing, you know, because I feel indebted to waves of stuff like that like made me feel like what we're doing is possible now. So
What do you think, Robbie?
You know, like I don't think we've ever like had a conversation about like what we're bringing is if what we're bringing is new to jiu-jitsu or to the grappling world. But I think what we've always tried to focus on is just trying to bring more voices into the grappling world, more new voices that aren't necessarily competitors, not necessarily professionals within in the jiu-jitsu or grappling world, but people that have experience in other different places that could maybe benefit other people within this space.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to use like historical language here, but if you catch my drift, like there's a reformation happening, right, in jiu-jitsu, where there was a consolidation of power in jiu-jitsu for a long period of time. It's now being way democratized. That's part of why I've started. That, frankly, I'm part of the wave of new people. Some of y'all have been doing it for a lot longer, and others, you know, mark their introduction with Hoist or even further with Horian or whatever. But ultimately, there's a dispersing of that information, and thanks to the internet and thanks to kind of the autodidactic nature of the type of people who like jiu-jitsu, it's really changing how you learn jiu-jitsu, and therefore it's going to change who can learn it. And I think that's going to be, you know, as all three of us are dads of young children, you as well, Joe, like in 10 years, I think if women's wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the country in the United States right now, then I think jiu-jitsu is close behind, and it's our job to help people, to show how beautiful it is. I don't know, like, and what we think is beautiful is that it helps you learn. It's like the perfect apparatus for learning, and it's not just learning jiu-jitsu. It teaches you to learn. Learning jiu-jitsu teaches you to learn other things.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's missing from jiu-jitsu, but that's what we're about.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a reformation, so it's a process, and I think it's there in certain pockets, but it's not widespread. And I think the other half of what you're talking about is in how jiu-jitsu is taught. And I think that's sort of like, I know people are being more methodical and intellectual and careful about how they're presenting what they teach, and they're revisiting how they structure their lessons and everything. But I feel like that's, to me, like that's where the growth edge is right now in the art. And that's why I'm so kind of focused on developing myself as an instructor now, as I'm sort of between my next competition season. But when I think about our children and the prospect of them being introduced to this art that's going to shape the way you learn, like, man, we could do a much better job there. Like there's a real opportunity to gain ground there. I'm curious how you guys think and feel about that, because I know I believe there's an essay or an interview on this subject in the first issue.
There is. You want to talk about it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, again, this gets back to this, like, more methods is kind of better, because having a choice lets you sort into the right environment for you, you know, in some way. You know, I think like I even personally have resonated with different teachers differently, or different like levels of, you know, degrees of freedom within a given class structure or something. But I think what you're talking about is, we had a really good conversation with Scott Severite, who is the head at Primal Milwaukee, Primal MMA.
Yeah.
And he
also has a podcast, Primal MMA.
Yeah. And he was, I mean, it was really illuminating, because it was kind of like, obviously at this point in time, anytime a thing gets really popular really fast, it almost gets like memed before it gets like digested and understood. And I think we're seeing that with the ecological approach to jiu-jitsu. I think like it's funny when you like, to me, the whole debate of like which is a better thing to do is like, I come from a musical background. And so, you know, I had a friend who always said like, 50% of your time should be spent playing, 50% of your time should be spent practicing. Like, obviously this isn't exact pedagogy, but it's interesting to like draw a distinction between those two things. And I think we're having this like what's a better way to learn a thing conversation in really like stauncher terms than we need to. I think it's more about like what's working and how do we play that up? How do we get more? And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but Scott was really amazing to talk to because he was like, you know, Greg Souders is the kind of firebrand that a thing needs, movements need to get started. Like change needs spearheads to sort of like happen. And I have never made his like personal acquaintance, but I'm like a fan of that guy in terms of what he's doing, the change that he's affecting, whether I'm charmed by him in any given moment of content or not. Like, I just feel like dudes like that are pretty necessary. But sitting down with Scott, he's like a softer edged face of this sort of this thing. And like I really hope, I mean, we really sort of edited that interview as a primer on the ecological approach that sort of doesn't have the devil horns and, you know, like the full combative attack mode to it. And so like, again, that's one, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's interesting because what he sort of says, like all learning is ecological in nature, so that like in jiu-jitsu, actually we've like focused on randori a lot more than a judo context. And so jiu-jitsu itself has been forged a lot more in rolling, and techniques have been developed in like improvisational context. And I think anybody who's done jiu-jitsu for more than a month or two has made connections in rolling, regardless of how, even if they go to the most sort of like step-by-step school. Like, I think no matter who you are, you kind of have to put jiu-jitsu together yourself. And so there are teaching practices that are getting closer to that. I think like the world will only really benefit from the most productive quarters of this conversation. And I think a lot of people that I look to in the space for inspiration are interested in new teaching methods and are not exactly interested in fully throwing everything out just because there's a new way of doing things. I mean, it's interesting because if you really want to watch what happens with ecological training over time, most sports have incorporated these insights years before jiu-jitsu has in a lot of ways. I mean, sports that have more money involved take fewer chances with athletes getting better, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of this stuff comes from people who are researching in
global football.
Yeah. Big old, you know,
yeah,
money changing hands sports. And they're leaning in that direction in a lot of ways. But then there are these other questions, right? Where like we get back to this third place thing. Like, I will just say for this is completely editorially like my own perspective and not necessarily power trips, but like, I don't think the only thing that needs to be happening in the gym is just learning as fast as you can and optimizing your expenditure of time.
Yeah.
I am like, it's self-professed, at least an artist in my own practice, not in jiu-jitsu, but in writing. And if I were just trying to optimize and squeeze all of the output out of the time, I would have never gotten anywhere.
Well, that's why what's the first issue about?
Yeah, our first issue is the theme of our first issue is play. And so like, I think that there are ways we can optimize, and I'll use the language on purpose, like we can optimize our learning moments. We can like fully integrate the otherwise sort of like deracinated techniques that we're learning through ecological practices. But then again, play is another way of being sort of aimless. And so this idea, but ironically also where you put things together and where experiments begin to pay off, right?
The happy accidents happen in the in-between moments where you're not overly focused on perfection or form or completion of something, but instead kind of, you know, in that a little bit of that in-between space in your brain. I mean, I think the other, just going quickly, like, just to be clear, again, all big fans of Greg Souders, like totally have listened to every single podcast available from him. I'm a big fan of Eco. But the way that he's presenting his argument is, if DeAndre Corbett doesn't win ADCC, it doesn't work. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea that if it's not working at the highest level and he's not winning a gold medal, that it's not. And I don't like that argument that has been set up against Greg or that he's even insinuated. Whereas Scott is teaching regular ass students in Milwaukee, people who come up in off the street and it's also working. So I think that is really fascinating that you have on one hand, you know, what was it that DeAndre won? One of the trials, the East Coast trials, I think last year. And at the same time, I hope that Scott got a white belt to a blue belt using similar tactics. And that's why we kind of went and talked to Scott, because Scott is employing it at a street level and isn't necessarily only judging it on the effectiveness within the kind of status quo of competition. And I find that really interesting too. Again, like both of them, but if we're talking about power trip, well, we're kind of interested in like the person off the street getting better.
Well, I mean, and plus,
Yeah.
I'd even say the beauty of, I mean, specifically speaking to the message of the ecological approach is ultimately that it's like potentially very decentralizing as a methodology. And so like adding, you know, hearing from other folks besides the person who's had the most success making noise about the practice is like the next step in a lot of ways. And yeah, so it's funny because we obviously have more than a passing interest in something like this, but really wanted to approach it like, I'm dumb, tell me how this is going to help me. Basically, I've been, you know, I'm mired in over a decade of jiu-jitsu that does not, I mean, which I would even argue like the way I learned sort of squares with my anecdotal experience with learning jiu-jitsu does kind of square with the insights, right? I don't think they're a threat. I mean, I don't think any of these new ways of doing things are necessarily a threat. Like, I think everybody was afraid that a heel hook was going to cripple everybody who could, you know, do one. And that some people have had some injuries, but like they exist and they've made the game better. They've made it broader. I think, you know, taboos in any sport. I mean, jiu-jitsu basically is jiu-jitsu because it's been, the rule sets of it have been pushed further apart from, you know, apparent sport of it over time. And like some of these things are to protect athletes and some of these things are to protect brands or governing bodies or that kind of thing. And like, again, it's, I think grappling sports can be discrete because of rule sets. It's not that, but it's kind of interesting that like with our sport specifically, there's not a given rule set. So like we haven't really decided what jiu-jitsu is, what sport jiu-jitsu is in a way where you could literally like give somebody one piece of paper and it's that. And then also now we have this fun chaos of like, we haven't even agreed on it as a training modality either. So like it's getting really kind of open source on both ends in a way that I don't think is going to hurt anybody. Again, it just keeps you moving.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're at an hour, and that's typically where I like to cap these things. I have to ask if people want to be, if they want to read Power Trip, if they want to, I don't know, subscribe to it, if they want to get their hands on it when it comes out, how do they do that? And also, how do they just go about staying abreast of all things Power Trip related?
Yeah. Great question. A lot of people ask us when they can buy stuff. And I want to I want to say that like maybe you can pick up that selling stuff is not our first goal right just yet, but it will be soon. We really got to finish the zine. You know, Robbie's really helping us kind of like organize what we're going to do for the release. It's going to come in 2024. I'll sell you that. It's going to come like not in 1 month, but not in 3 months. You know what I mean? So like, we're going to be soon having a website where you can pre-order it. For in the meantime, give us a follow at powertrip.ww on Instagram. That's where we put most of our stuff right now. You can write us. We'll write you back. We'll probably send you stickers if you ask for some stickers. So yeah, come say hi. Hopefully you'll enjoy what's to come with Power Trip.
Awesome, guys. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I've been pushing for this to happen for a while now, but timing is critical and timing feels right. I really love what you're doing, and thank you for making me a part of it. Whenever what I wrote gets published is fine with me. I'm just happy to contribute to it in some way, and I'm open to any and all future collaborations, just let me know how I can best support you.
Yeah, I can't believe we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Joe wrote an essay about competing at the New York Open, which he talked about for at least 5 episodes leading up to right around now. So yeah, absolutely want to read what Joe wrote. It's really cool, and we made some hopefully cool art to kind of like.
Oh, the art's fucking beautiful.
Yeah, man. Like, look, I think that this podcast is part of why I started talking to Jimmy about this, and why we wanted to do a project, and why I felt comfortable reaching out to people like Robbie on the internet, is because you're kind of being open with your practice and kind of putting it out there. And that's brave and cool. And yeah, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, we buried the lead. Your work in Power Trip is actually a great example of how, like, there are many possible responses to grappling, and that the like sort of like the experience of grappling, something happens that's internal that can be shared and can be sort of like codified in different mediums. And so like yeah, to me it's like a proof text for like, I mean, the fact that you like heard us, found us, wanted to contribute that, and that's what showed up. I was like, oh man, there's people are out there. Like, it's like, yeah, like there's this, yeah, felt great.
Well, I didn't know that you could talk about a zine for an hour, but we did it.
Appreciate you guys. And yeah, I just wanted to say that, like what you're discovering with Power Trip, the thing I've discovered with this podcast is that it really is, it's like a campfire in the night. And people are out there and they see that fire and they come sit by it. And
Good
generally
metaphor.
speaking, the best people are coming in out of the dark and sitting at the fire. And it's awesome to be a part of this growing community with you. And it's awesome to be sort of aligned in the mission and vision of just let's have a more transparent and open discussion about grappling, and let's make it more accessible. So thank you for what you're doing. And it was great talking to you tonight.
Likewise.
Yeah, Joe.
If we ever wind up in Nashville at the same time, we can talk about Fender offsets another day, but I didn't want to.
Awesome.
Somebody doesn't qualify for this conversation.